Hey, everybody. It's Thursday, July 10th, 2025. You're listening to the Mo News podcast. I'm Moshe Nunu.
And I'm Jill Wagner. This is the place where we bring you just the facts. Moshe, happy Friday Eve.
Yes, happy Friday Eve. And you know what we do here. We read all the news and read between the lines so you don't have to. On this July 10th, National Kitten Day. I'm not a cat person myself. I know many people are. We're more dog people. But we embrace all. Jill, on the Mo News Premium Slack, we had some people who were very upset about my comments about sugar cookies yesterday. My dismissal of sugar cookies on National Sugar Cookie Day.
Yes, as we were talking about yesterday, I thought that it was perhaps an overlooked cookie because it was so simple.
Yes, overlooked. Jill, we also found out yesterday on This Day in History, we were talking about Catherine the Great and how she has this crazy story about, taking out her husband and becoming the leader of Russia. And we were talking about how, that'd be a really great TV series. Well, it turns out, Jill, that there is, in fact, a TV series called The Great on Hulu that's a few seasons in, starring none other than Elle Fanning, who happens to be a Mo News community member as Catherine the Great. And for the most part, gets some very positive reviews. People are like, Moshe, you got to check out the show. It doesn't hew that closely to history, but still is a worthwhile watch, though I'm told by some of you that is, quote, raunchy.
Quite risque, as they say.
But what isn't these days? So anyway, it appears Hulu is a couple years ahead of us, Jill, on the Catherine the Great inspired series.
All right, now to the headlines, starting with those floods in Texas. The number of missing continues to climb. What we have learned as well about Camp Mystic's emergency plans. And even more deadly flash flooding, this time in neighboring New Mexico. In business news, Linda Yaccarino stepping down as CEO of Elon Musk's X, as his Grok AI chatbot under fire for sharing anti-Semitic posts. To D.C., where there are reports that the Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, did not inform the White House before he paused weapons shipments to Ukraine.
Yeah, we'll get in the who is doing what and who's approving what over at the White House.
And former President Biden's doctor invokes doctor-patient privilege and the Fifth Amendment when testifying about the ex-president's health, but why he says don't read too much into it. Too late.
Oh, Joe Biden's health? People don't read too much into it at this point? Come on, the ship has sailed.
To tech news, TikTok building a new version of its app for U.S. users, what it could mean about a potential sale.
And what sort of glitches it might have.
And beer makers trying to make non-alcoholic beer happen. But will it go the way of fake meat, aka just a fad? Or will it be the next diet soda here to stay? Plus, Moshe is on This Day in History.
Jill, it's a big day in my life. News on that front and on This Day in History.
Okay, let's start with an update on the search and rescue operation in Texas. At least 119 people are confirmed dead after catastrophic flooding in the central part of the state. It is the deadliest freshwater flooding in Texas in more than a century. The potential for finding survivors is growing less likely. Officials are still looking for 170 people who are still missing. Search teams are working through sweltering heat and humidity and a massive debris field that stretches for miles. They are combing through wreckage, looking for people who could possibly be stuck, digging out vehicles that are lodged between trees and other debris. And to the hard-hit Camp Mystic, where more than 24 people were killed, mostly children, we're also learning that Texas inspectors signed off on Camp Mystic's emergency planning just 2 days before the catastrophic flooding.
Yeah, apparently the Department of State Health Services released records yesterday showing the camp complied with a host of state regulations regarding procedures to be implemented in case of a disaster, among them instructing campers on what to do if they need to evacuate and assigning specific duties to each staff member and counselor. So camps effectively here responsible for their own emergency plans. Inspectors evaluate the plans to ensure they meet several state requirements, including procedures for evacuation, but implementation is obviously on the camps here. And again, the bigger issue is this assumes people are awake. It's not clear what protocols were in place. It was not clear who was awake, what access they had to National Weather Service reports, what planning was being done given there was a flood watch and they sit in a major flood plain there at Camp Mystic. And going back to the 80s, there was a major flooding disaster at the camp that was deadly. As we told you yesterday, this area did not have sirens. They depended on camps calling one another. Again, this was a holiday weekend, a whole variety of issues here. And it's leading many state and local officials to say we need to reconsider these plans and maybe take some things out of the camps and local areas' hands and create some larger guidelines, regulations, and warning systems for everybody at the local and state level.
And most from one flooding event to another in neighboring New Mexico, where historic flash floods killed at least 3 people and swept away homes in the remote mountain community of Ruidoso, New Mexico on Tuesday, an area that is still recovering from devastating wildfires last year. Officials there say a 4-year-old girl, a 7-year-old boy, and a man believed to be between 40 and 50 years old were all, quote, swept downstream by the unprecedented floodwaters that struck the area. In a statement, they said the Rio Ruidoso rose to a record-breaking 20 feet, which is 5 feet higher than the previous record.
Yeah, there were a whole bunch of swiftwater rescues in this flooding situation. Jill, this area is not a newcomer to flooding, as this is monsoon season in the southwest U.S. between mid-June through early September. But they say this is some of the worst that they've seen. And one of the issues they have here is there was a major fire last year called the South Fork Fire last June, and it burned through about 17,000 acres. And the fire was so hot that it turned the soil hydrophobic, what's called hydrophobic, which means it does not absorb water. So you often see this, those of you in California are very familiar with this, where, there's these large wildfires on top of droughts, and then the rain comes and mudslides quickly happen. The monsoons create these situations because, again, the soil, even though it's been drought ridden for a very long time, just cannot absorb the water based on, sort of the recent climate. So sadly, Jill, we find ourselves for the second time this week reporting on deadly flash flooding in the U.S.
And Moshe, now to some good news when it comes to crime and major U.S. cities for once. As we've now hit the halfway mark of 2025, the murder rates are down in many cities. Baltimore has recorded just 68 homicides as of July 1st. That's the lowest number in more than 50 years. Los Angeles is on track for its lowest yearly homicide rate in nearly 6 decades. Chicago has seen a more than 30% decline in homicides compared to last year. And New York City experienced the lowest number of shootings and murders in recorded history from January through May of this year. Independent crime analyst Jeff Asher even suggesting this year could have the lowest murder rate in recorded U.S. history. So the big question, what's behind it? Well, Maryland Governor Wes Moore credited the decline in Baltimore's murder rate to the $50 million in state funding that the Baltimore Police Department's received since he took office in 2023, and a nearly $11 million boost to the city's prosecutor's office. New York City Police Commissioner Jessica Tisch pointed to the department sending additional support to areas with historically high concentrations of crime. In LA, the deputy chief, Alan Hamilton, saying a more visible police presence is deterring crime in Los Angeles. But nationwide, murder rates also down this year by about 14%. That is according to an independent think tank and also a data firm. Moshe, you spoke to New York City Mayor Eric Adams on Wednesday, and I know you asked him about the improved murder rate. So what does he attribute it to?
Yeah, by the way, you can look out for that episode later today, the full interview there with Adams on crime, immigration, Trump, his indictment, how he's looking to come back and get re-election. Also, Jill, his favorite Broadway show and favorite New York City restaurant. We did a quick fire round of some of the questions you might have as a New Yorker.
Will you give us a hint on the restaurant?
It's in Harlem. He was willing to name a favorite restaurant, it turns out. So you will have that later on today's podcast. But let's get back to the issue at hand here. Crime, a key issue. And that's something he was actually very excited to talk about, Jill, because it turns out, as you mentioned this year, the lowest recorded murder rate in recorded history in New York for the first half of a year. And so he attributes it to a data-based approach. And this is something we've seen with something called CompStat years ago when Bill Bratton was New York City police commissioner. He was also commissioner in LA and adopted a similar program. Basically, go to where the major murders are happening and flood the zone with police. This is a tried and true tactic. And so they basically have identified several dozen areas in New York City where they were having major problems, major crimes. And he said very simply, go after the guns. You go after the guns, especially all the illegal guns on the street. You will bring the murder rate down. And so that is what has been done. Now, we will say there are other crimes that are up in New York, lesser crimes like assault and theft. And so they're figuring that out as well. But he's also flooded the zone on the subways. It's very interesting watching this trend line, especially in big cities with, a lot of Democratic leaders, because you had this, defund the police moment right out of George Floyd. And then a year later, you had this sort of refund the police moment as the crime rate started to skyrocket. One of the things Adam told me too, is like something, got triggered during COVID. Like we saw crime rates skyrocket in a way that we hadn't seen in a very long time. Now, he's a former NYPD beat cop, did a variety of things at NYPD over 2 decades. And he was describing the situation in the 70s and 80s, which was just skyrocket. I mean, any crime we saw in the last couple of years in any of these major cities pales in comparison to what was going on in the 70s and 80s, just for those who don't remember it. But you are seeing this, and I did mention him, it's not just New York, you're seeing this nationally. He said, well, they're also looking at some of the things we're doing here in New York and adopting them in other cities across the country. But the data here does show that we sort of had this big climb in 21 and 22 out of COVID, and then already starting in 23, starting to come down, 24 coming down, and now this year, pretty significantly down, at least the most violent crimes, thankfully.
All right, time for the speed read, starting with some big news in the business world from Axios. Linda Yaccarino stepping down as the CEO of X, formerly known as Twitter.
Do we still have to say that, Jill? Have they made X happen at this point? They might have.
I think to Elon Musk's credit, he did somehow make X happen.
It's like at some point we'll all accept Gulf of America, X. It's certain things, it takes a while and then you're like, okay.
So Elon Musk had brought in Yaccarino 2 years ago, largely to rebuild relationships with advertisers who had left the platform after Musk bought it. She had previously overseen advertising at NBC. In a post on X, she said, quote, "When Elon Musk and I first spoke of his vision for X, I knew it would be an opportunity of a lifetime to carry out the extraordinary mission of this company. I am immensely grateful to him for entrusting me." She did not provide a reason that she is leaving. Musk's decision to fold X into xAI, which is his artificial intelligence startup, has taken some pressure off of social media revenues, which pale in comparison to the potential profits from AI, which did help create a natural moment for Yaccarino to depart.
Yeah, I mean, she was there 2 years, Jill, and, Musk is not known for keeping many of his executives for a very long time. It's a challenge to work under Elon Musk. It's also not clear how much she was really in charge of, because ultimately he dictates the vision for his companies. And he is, again, known for churning through CEOs at a number of his companies. But she was very loyal to him, both on X, at various events, etc., especially having come from sort of the legacy media world, where a lot of people from her old world were like, what are you doing in this new space? And she stood by it. And she was able to leverage various things, including for a while there earlier this year, the relationship that Musk had with Trump. And so in many cases, implying to advertisers, you don't want trouble with the White House, you might want to advertise on X. And so she is leaving now. We'll see who else he brings in there, especially as, again, X is now part of a larger AI company, and that's not her expertise either. She probably goes back to, being the CEO with an expertise in advertising of some company out there, but has this kind of deep knowledge in tech and new media now that you could bring to the old media, the legacy media space that is in desperate need for that knowledge. In the meantime, though, there's still some fires they're trying to put out at X, including this most recent controversy with Grok. If you haven't heard of Grok, spelled Grok, it is the AI service of X. So you have OpenAI owns ChatGPT, then X has their version, which is Grok. And so if you're on X ever, people often write, add Grok. Like, is this true? Add Grok. What do you think about this? Which is what happened this week, Jill. But it turns out that Grok, whatever updates Grok got, turned it, shall we say, a bit anti-Semitic or vehemently anti-Semitic, praising Hitler in recent posts. Now, one thing that Musk has always said about X is like, we're not about being politically correct, and Grok is not going to be politically correct like some of these other AI services out there. Well, it went from not being politically correct to praising effectively the Holocaust. So this all happens on Tuesday over on X. There was a post from a Cindy Steinberg. Now, the Cindy Steinberg, it turns out, didn't exist, but Steinberg apparently says in a post saying that the people who died in Texas effectively deserved it. And so then Grok replies, somebody's like, at Grok, what do you think about this post from Steinberg? And Grok replies, she's gleefully celebrating the deaths of white kids in the recent Texas flash floods, calling them future fascists, and that surname every damn time, as they say. Somebody says, elaborate. What do you mean by that surname? Well, apparently Grok then goes on to say, well, it's very clear that this is an Ashkenazi Jewish last name. Then somebody essentially replies, like, Grok, what could be done about that? Who could help with that? To which Grok replies, Adolf Hitler could help with that. Adolf Hitler would know how to take care of the situation. So that escalated very quickly. It's clear now, and X acknowledges this, that this wasn't an actual Cindy Steinberg. This was somebody from the right wing, a neo-Nazi, using the name to basically stir up anti-Jewish hate and goad Grok into replying, to which the AI took the bait. Now, Musk blamed the outburst on the coding of Grok, saying Grok was, quote, too compliant to user prompts, too eager to please and be manipulated. And he says that Grok is being updated. So I guess what he's saying is the AI, basically needs an update because it was just trying to effectively be deferential to the tone of what they were getting. Jill, one of the issues is Grok is trained on the responses and the dialogue happening on X. And one of the critiques about X is that they've let a lot of neo-Nazis and right-wingers onto the platform in recent years who were previously banned. And so the AI learns from the dialogue as to what they think is acceptable dialogue, and what is dialogue that the folks, the users on X, would want to hear and read. So latest evidence here, Jill, that they got to go back to the drawing board on all these AIs. And as much as we talk about being worried about AI taking your job, certain AIs not ready for prime time.
So because Grok was making headlines, I decided to check out Grok's feed over on X. And I was
did you talk to Grok yesterday?
I more was an observer.
Observer
and
of Grok. Okay.
I was just reading through all of his or its or whatever pronoun we're going to give it.
What gender pronoun does the non-woke AI at X use?
And I was just struck at how real and how much it sounded like a person. And I was a little confused because I was like, wait, what is this? Who is this? And I did a bunch of research and I realized, okay, this is the AI chatbot. It's trying to be non-woke, yada, yada. But it is just incredible that if you aren't familiar with what it is, just how close to a human sounding voice this was responding to questions with. Which is pretty scary. And as you said, very scary that it's the reason perhaps that it is so anti-Semitic is because it's being trained by looking at real conversations that are happening on Twitter.
It's reflecting the environment on X back on X users. So back to the drawing board. No shortage of controversies over there in Elon Musk land, Jill.
All right, from CNN, some news on the controversy over a recent freeze on weapons going to Ukraine. We are learning that Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth apparently did not inform the White House before he authorized a pause on weapons shipments to Ukraine last week. Shortly after learning about the pause, Trump had told Hegseth to restart the shipment of weapons, specifically interceptor missiles for Patriot air defense systems. Those have been critical to protecting Ukrainian civilians from missile and drone attacks by Russia. The Pentagon did not announce until Monday night that it would restart shipments at the president's direction. Trump has been increasingly frustrated with Russian President Putin. This week, he accused Putin of spouting, quote, bullshit, and said Tuesday that he was very strongly considering supporting a punishing sanctions bill against Russia.
Yeah, this is something Lindsey Graham has proposed over in the Senate, calling for a 500% tariff on goods imported from countries that continue to buy Russian oil, which would have huge ramifications for China, for India, who are the main buyers of Russian oil, especially in light of what has taken place in Ukraine in recent years, and effectively the U.S. and European boycott on Russian oil. Trump saying he'll look at it very strongly. So a few interesting things happening here. Trump's super frustrated with Russia and Putin and feeling that despite the fact he's been critical often of Zelensky, of aid to Ukraine, that he has to help Ukraine defend themselves, which is interesting because, that's sort of, he was critical of that and Biden was saying that for a long time. But even Trump saying, Putin is frustrating me. We got to send them weapons. Also interesting that he's the commander in chief and he's like, what's going on here? Hegseth froze the weapons shipment as it was on a route to Ukraine. So the White House essentially letting Hegseth out to dry here, reflecting that the president is overriding him as opposed to kind of circling the wagons. Now, the Caroline Leavitt, the press secretary at the White House yesterday, did say that Trump continues to have confidence in Hegseth. But as we've told you, going back to the Signal chat, going back to various controversies Hegseth has had, of cabinet secretaries, he sort of, has his issue. Trump has had his issues with him a few different times. though you haven't seen, besides, Mike Waltz, the national security advisor, we're not seeing the sort of turnover we saw in the first term, at least not yet. So this is something we will watch here, sort of this balance that Trump tries to draw between trying to end the war to the extent that he thinks is possible, even though he's super annoyed with Putin right now, and continuing to aid Ukraine, which is being pummeled right now as Putin sees an opportunity to continue to gain more territory ahead of final peace talks.
From Axios, former President Biden's physician, Dr. Kevin O'Connor, refused to answer questions to the House Oversight Committee on Wednesday, citing the Fifth Amendment and doctor-patient confidentiality. The committee is investigating Biden's decline while in office. O'Connor had regular access to Biden during his presidency and publicly attested to his fitness during the re-election campaign. O'Connor initially declined to testify in front of the committee, but he was subpoenaed. Earlier this week, his lawyers tried to postpone the hearing. Republicans said, nope, we're having it. O'Connor is one of Biden's closest confidants. He has been with Biden since he was vice president. The Republican chairman of the committee, though, James Comer, said afterward that, quote, Dr. O'Connor took the fifth when asked if he was told to lie about President Biden's health and whether he was fit to be president of the United States. O'Connor's lawyers, though, told the committee in an opening statement that President Trump's order of a Justice Department investigation, quote, leaves Dr. O'Connor no choice but to invoke his constitutional rights under the Fifth Amendment. They say that they want to emphasize that asserting the Fifth Amendment privilege does not imply that Dr. O'Connor has committed any crime.
Yeah, there's a couple, pretty clear reasons here, right? He's got the doctor-patient privilege thing. He also has an ongoing criminal investigation the Republicans have announced here. So ultimately, he doesn't want to say anything that will potentially hurt him long term. It doesn't necessarily mean a cover up, right? It just means that his lawyers were like, you shouldn't be talking right now, given everything that is swirling. Obviously, there have been a lot of books out recently. We did have Biden's cancer diagnosis, a lot of questions about what they knew, when they knew it, especially given that the state of his cancer basically means that he had it while he was in office. So there's been many questions about whether they knew he had cancer and they just covered it up, which is something that Kevin O'Connor would know, right? Which Republicans are asking about. So there's a lot of scrutiny, not surprisingly, from Republicans on Capitol Hill. They run the investigations now, and they're mainly looking not at the current administration, at the previous administration, because that's what the other party typically does. And so, we'll see here what comes of this in O'Connor. One of the other things, Jill, that they're looking into is Biden's use of an auto pen to sign legislation, sign documents. Now, this is something that's existed for many, many presidents in the modern era. Truman, Kennedy, a whole bunch of presidents have used the auto pen, but nobody as much as Joe Biden. It leads to the theory that he wasn't always there, that his staff might have been signing stuff on his behalf. Now, the Biden folks deny that, but ultimately, this is another thing here that's part of this larger investigation that Republicans on Capitol Hill are conducting.
From the newsletter The Information, TikTok is developing a new version of its app for U.S. users ahead of an expected sale to a group of investors. The company plans to launch the new app on September 5th, while the existing app will stop working in March of next year. The timeline could shift, though, according to the report. TikTok users in the U.S. would have to download the new app to continue to use the social networking platform.
Yeah, so to recap here, remember, there was a law passed last year. It was supposed to go into effect in January that said unless ByteDance, the mainly Chinese company, sells off TikTok to a non-Chinese owner, TikTok is banned here in America. Well, Trump has now extended that several times. He sees TikTok as one reason he won the election, big for young people. So he had the ability in the law to extend the law for 90 days. He has now done that a couple times. The next time it comes up is in September. So he technically wasn't able to, according to the law, but he's decided to do that anyway because there are negotiations happening with who else? China. But as it turns out, we have many things to negotiate with China, including those tariffs. So China was not necessarily very amenable to, to begin with, to selling off TikTok, but especially in light of the tariffs, et cetera. So that's been held up, though Trump has said that there's pretty much a deal at this point for a private owner of TikTok. Who that owner is, Jill? Not clear. There are many interested parties. I was with some Amazon executives recently. I was like, are you guys going to buy TikTok? Like, we can't say it. It's like, oh. Which totally makes sense, right? Because if you look at it, Meta has social media, Google has YouTube, Microsoft has LinkedIn and some of its social media. So all these major tech companies all have a social media outlet. So totally makes sense. There's the shopping component, etc. So last time you saw Walmart was interested, Oracle was interested. So there's a few names that have been circulating there when it comes to TikTok ownership. We will see who that is, but there's going to be some interesting complications here because China's not necessarily amenable to selling the algorithm, selling a whole bunch of stuff. So they're effectively going to have to recreate TikTok and then transfer over users. So it could mean for a new look for TikTok in September, folks. It could mean a glitchier experience as, it's a large app. They got to transfer the stuff. The technology will not be completely identical. And so look for that in September, TikTokers.
And is TikTok without the algorithm? That's the question. But Moshe, as you're talking about Amazon potentially buying it, I was just thinking about BookTok, which is on TikTok, which has definitely gotten a lot of younger people into reading again. That would be very complimentary for Amazon, which did start as an online bookstore.
That was the OG thing that Jeff Bezos first invented it for back in the 90s. So, there's a lot of reasons to have TikTok, but only a handful of companies that have the resources to buy TikTok. Certainly Elon was interested. At times Trump was like, oh, maybe I'll let Elon buy it. Well, not anymore, right? They don't like each other anymore. So there's that. Meta obviously already has Facebook and Instagram and WhatsApp. So do you, trust them to have yet another social media platform? That seems like a lot. So, then you even think about the companies that could afford TikTok. The field gets smaller and smaller. So we'll see what happens. We'll see if there's a deal. It, again, depends on the Chinese. It depends on a variety of factors. And so we will be watching that here in September, just after Labor Day.
And a follow-up to a story we reported earlier this week about beer sales taking a really big hit from Bloomberg.
It's beer week here on the Mo News podcast.
It is summer, after all. It feels appropriate. A closer look at non-alcoholic beer, which beer makers are trying to get to have a second act. The category boomed in recent years as the likes of Anheuser-Busch, InBev, Heineken, and Diageo poured in money. But after those gains made it one of brewing's few bright spots, it's still only 2% of the global beer market's volume. The push into non-alcoholic beer is a reminder of how much the industry is struggling. Craft beer, remember when that was all the rage? That peaked. The hard seltzer boom fizzled. Younger adults going out less. Legalized cannabis is replacing six-packs. Weight loss drugs, also a threat. So the global beer volume, as we've talked about, has declined in the past 2 years. Meanwhile, stocks of the world's big brewers have not returned to their pre-pandemic levels. One Bloomberg analyst saying, quote, they have no choice but to get into alcohol-free.
Yeah, but though it's interesting, it's still just at about 2% of overall beer sales of the non-alcoholic beer sales. And you do see even the big ones getting into it, AB InBev, which has a whole variety of offerings, right? They're the world's largest brewer. They are number one now in the U.S. with Michelob Ultra. We told you about that earlier this week. They turned it into the best-selling beer in America as a low-calorie option for sporty types who drink beer. Then they announced the non-alcoholic version, Michelob Ultra Zero, back in September. It's a commercial featuring young adults taking a break from beach volleyball to crack one open and then running back. The tagline is stay in the game. So if you're doing sports, you're drinking non-alcoholic beer instead of, Gatorade or some other sport drink. You do see Heineken 0.0 ads out there. They've brought in a whole bunch of celebs to tout their beer. Heineken's campaign is 0.0 reasons needed, and it's encouraging people to drink it whenever they want with no explanation required because it's non-alcoholic. Drink it at work, at lunch. It's non-alcoholic, Jill.
I'm drinking it now. No, I'm just
she's not. She's not. I guess I'll have to give it a try. I never really put my head around loving beer so much that I need to have a non-alcoholic version of the beer. If I'm not going to drink booze, then I'm not drinking, non-alcoholic versions of mixed drinks or beer, but to each their own here. Apparently a lot of this is Gen Z related, as you mentioned, and we'll see if non-alcoholic beer can be a thing, or as you said earlier, it's more of a plant-based meat type situation. Jill, it does come on this day in history where I have a beverage-related piece of history. We can begin with that, actually. It was on this day 40 years ago. One of the most infamous events in beverage history takes place. Coca-Cola, after about 3 months of trying the new Coke, they basically took Coca-Cola, everybody loved it, and they're like, we have a new formula, and we're only making the new formula available. This creates such controversy 40 years ago that after a couple months, there was like such public outcry. They're like, fine. We're bringing back the classic. So they had old Coke, they called it new Coke, the new formula. People got really upset. And so on this day in history, they bring back the old Coke, but they call it Coca-Cola Classic.
You got to give the people what they want. It's one of those things. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. I'm not a soda drinker, but big mistake. Big. Huge. Huge mistake, Coca-Cola.
All right. This is sort of a beverage-related piece of history. We go back to 1850 on this day, July 10th. Millard Fillmore, the vice president, is sworn in as the 13th president of the United States. He was replacing President Zachary Taylor, who had died the day before. He was suffering from an intestinal ailment. They believe that he ate a whole bunch of stuff, something was bad, and it was effectively food poisoning that he died from. But we would learn later that apparently several presidents, Jill, in the mid-1800s who lived at the White House would die of related ailments. And they believe it was because the White House water supply came from the Potomac River, which was polluted with a lot of human and animal waste at the time. So basically, presidents for a while there in the mid-1800s were drinking poop water. And so a whole bunch of them got sick off of it. Now, that is a classic drink we aren't bringing back.
Poop water. Is that the official term?
Yes, the scientific term is poop water. But, it's one of those things where it's like, everyone's like, oh, it's never been, things seem so bad today. I was like, you know what was bad in the 1800s when like the president of the United States couldn't get non-poop water and like a bunch of them die from intestinal ailments.
Perspective. It's
perspective,
good.
folks.
It's good.
Like, do you know what life was like 150 years ago? Like, no. Like, for whatever we have today, we're very lucky sanitation-wise where we are today versus where we were even 150 years ago, even 75 years ago. All right, on this day in history, some currency-related news. The U.S. dollar used to be much bigger. On this day in 1929, American paper currency reduces in size by 25%. So all of our bills were totally huge. They're like, it's costing a lot of money to print these bills, and even like the designs were like much more intricate than they are today. They decided to standardize it on this day in 1929 as you got smaller bills. We'll end here with a bit of pop culture history on this day in 1965. So turning 60 years old today, I ain't get no satisfaction. The Rolling Stones, still around today, 60 years ago, topping the U.S. charts for the first time with that hit.
And Mick Jagger still going strong. I guess what you consider strong.
Listen, I would say he's 81 going on 82, stronger than a lot of other 82-year-olds. Jill, he's about the same age as Joe Biden and, seems to be sort of more on his feet there, bringing that back from earlier in the podcast.
At least according to his doctor.
Right. I don't know if I'd, make him President Jagger, but why not? Let's just give it a shot. And Jill, one more item on this day 4 years ago, July 10th, 2021, I married the love of my life, Alex Hall. I am the luckiest man in the world. It was a wedding planned during COVID, back when we were having the how many people are we allowed to have in a public wedding, and we made a bet on the summer of 2021, worked out in our favor, and I'm so grateful to have found my soulmate. Jill, this podcast wouldn't exist, Mo News wouldn't exist without her. She was the one really pushing me to take this seriously and make this happen, and knew there was something here. So I'm thankful to her for so many reasons, including that, as well as being an incredible mother to our daughter, Olivia.
Aw, happy anniversary to the Winoonus.
Thank you. What do you do on the 4th anniversary? What is that anniversary called?
Just, I don't know, do a
Asking
dinner.
for a friend.
Do a dinner, get a gift. I'm not sure. You guys have a young kid. But Alex is so good with doing special things. I feel like in my house, we tend to let some of the anniversaries and birthdays go, but I don't know.
Fruit and flowers, I'm told, according to Google, for the 4th anniversary, it's fruit and flowers. I can do that. But then somebody says electrical appliances.
No,
Alex, you got
skip.
an air conditioner, a dishwasher, and some fruit coming your way.
Nothing says I love you like a new blender.
There you go. Oh, it depends on the blender, Jill. It's Amazon Prime week. We got some deals.
right. Well,
Steals and deals.
All right. Well, happy anniversary to you and Alex. And that is it for this edition of the Mo News Podcast. Thank you guys for listening. If you like what you hear, please share this with your friends. It will help us grow. Follow us, subscribe so you don't miss an episode, and review us in the App Store.
See you guys.
Thanks for listening to the Mo News Podcast. Have a fantastic day. I hope you enjoyed.